These are 13 Spanish hacks I learned in Mexico that will help you sound like a local and impress native speakers. Number 1 is don't say me gustaría when you order. Say me da or me das. Me da is considered to be a bit more formal as we're using usted instead of tú, which is more formal, but you can still say me das and sound completely polite. A lot of people might think that this sounds a bit strong and a bit forward, but when you say me da or me das, it is a very polite way to command someone to give you something. So, for example, me da unos tacos, por favor, or me das un agua de Jamaica, por favor. This is a really simple way that you can order anything you want in Spanish. When you say something like me gustaría, it sounds a bit odd. That's great that you would like it, but do you want me to give it to you? That's why it's better to say me da or me das. You can also say things like quiero, quisiera, deme, which is the formal command, or dame, which is the informal command. But if you want to be polite, just say me da or me das when ordering. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was how to use the word ahorita. The word ahorita, you would think, means right now. However, in Mexico, ahorita means in a little bit, in a little while, and honestly, it could mean never. Ahorita is not right now. If you want to say right now, you can say something like ahora mismo. For example, dámelo ahora mismo. Give it to me right now. If you want to say now, you can just say ahora. But if you want to say in a little bit, in a little while, or maybe even never, you can just say ahorita. For example, sí, ahorita te lo doy. Ahorita, no te preocupes. In a little bit, in a little while. Don't worry. But you should be worried because it's probably never going to happen. Well, that's not true. Anyways, you get me. Also, real quick, if you want to learn more Mexican Spanish with me, click the link in the video description to join my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. Our goal is to help you have a 10-minute conversation in Spanish in 90 days without feeling nervous. Check it out by clicking the link in the video description. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico is to say provecho to people when they're eating. So, for example, if you go to a taco stand and you order some tacos, you're like, okay, me da una orden de 5 tacos, por favor. They're going to give you the tacos. And when you leave, you can say, gracias, provecho. And you say, enjoy your meal to everyone. You can also say this when you arrive to a place. It's not as common in more formal restaurants. Typically, you hear this in more informal settings like going to a taco stand or eating on the street. So you'll walk up, you'll say, buenas tardes, provecho, gracias, whatever. Then, when you leave, you can say provecho again, enjoy. And when someone says provecho to you, you can say gracias, igualmente, thank you, likewise. Even though they might have already finished eating, it's just a polite way to say, hey, thanks so much. I hope you finish enjoying your meal or digesting your meal. It's just a nice thing to say. Another funny Spanish hack I learned in Mexico is that when you say a joke, you can add to the end. So, for example, you could say something like, oye, ¿te gusta comer el chile, verdad? If you make that sound, it's kind of a funny, joking thing that Mexicans like to do. So, oye, ¿te gusta el chile, verdad? In fact, I've had people comment on my videos saying, this guy sounds Mexican because of the way he laughs and because he does that thing. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was to use hand gestures. I don't know if this is a Spanish hack, but it is important to know. For example, when you cross the street here in Mexico and a car lets you go, you can do this. Now, in the United States, someone will be like, man, what the heck? Like, why are you doing that to me? But the reality is, in Mexico, when you do this, you're saying thank you. In the US, we might do something like, hey, thanks so much. In Mexico, you just do this. And you can use this, whenever you want to say thank you. Another fun hand gesture is this one, which, from what I understand, comes from the show El Chavo del Ocho. So he kind of popularized this, basically meaning yes. And he would do this thing where he'd say, eso. That's it. That's right. Exactly. Yes. And it's very common to see Mexican Spanish speakers do this when eating or drinking something. So, for example, someone might say to you while you're eating, oye, ¿vas a la fiesta esta noche? While you're eating, right? You can't speak or your mouth is full, so you can just do this. Another thing, if you're upset or angry, it's kind of like saying F you in Mexico, is doing this. If you do that, that basically means like, hey man, F you, whatever, like that. Okay? But this means thank you. The next Spanish hack I learned was using the word mande. Now, be careful with the word mande because the historical origin of mande is not the prettiest. People use this in Mexico to say what. But mande comes from the word mandar, meaning to command. It can also mean to send. But the reason that people even say this in the first place is because when the Spaniards arrived to Mexico and they conquered, well, the natives started replying to the Spaniards with mande, like command me, tell me what to do. Now, in the modern context, when you don't understand something, you'll just say, mande? What did you say? Mande? No te escuché bien. Mande? Literally meaning command me. Now, this isn't as popular in the modern day, but you could say something else like que or como. So if you don't hear something, you could say como. Como is seen as more polite than que. Que still works, but it does sound a little bit stronger. So if you didn't hear something or if you didn't understand something, use como instead of que. But if you're in Mexico, you can also use mande. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was to use the word permiso all the time. Permiso means excuse me, and we use it when we're kind of trying to squeeze by people. When you're in a big city like Mexico City, for example, you're going to use this all the time. Ay, permiso. Ay, perdón. Now, there are 3 different words we can use to say excuse me, but they're all used in different contexts. We have permiso, which is used when we're trying to get by someone. Ay, permiso. Excuse me, I'm trying to get by. Permiso. We have perdón, which can be used as, ay, perdón. Let's say I bump into you. Ay, perdón. Lo siento. Ay, perdón, right? I'm sorry, I bumped into you. This is like pardon in English. And we have disculpe. Disculpe could also be seen as excuse me in English, but it's used to get someone's attention. Joven, disculpe, right? You're trying to get the attention of the waiter. Disculpe, excuse me. Yes, sí, right? Blah, 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 whatever. Okay, so permiso, trying to get by. Excuse me. Perdón. Oh my gosh, I bumped into you. I'm sorry. And disculpe is used for excuse me. I'm trying to get your attention. Disculpe. The next Spanish hack I learned was to use buen dia. It is very common here in Mexico City that instead of saying buenos dias, people would just say to you buen dia. Of course, you can still say buenos dias, but it's very common to hear buen dia. This can be used in the morning up until about 12 in the afternoon. Then after 12, you can use buenas tardes, and once it gets dark, you can use buenas noches. It's interesting though, because I found that here in Mexico, even when it's pretty dark out, maybe it's 7 or 8 at night, people will still say buenas tardes. So buen dia in the morning, buenas tardes in the afternoon, buenas noches when the sun has gone down and it's dark. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was to use filler words. If you really want to sound like a local, then make sure you're using filler words. Words like pues, este, o sea. It is a dead giveaway to me that someone is not a native Spanish speaker, that they're not from Mexico, for example, when they say something like If someone's from Mexico, rarely will they say They will say or este. It's really subtle, but I promise you, if you use these little filler words, you're going to sound much more native. Okay, so pues, meaning well. Pues, no sé. Well, I don't know. O sea, meaning in other words, or rather. O sea, me gustó la película, pero no tanto. So, I mean, in other words, I like the movie, but not that much. Or something like este, which just means Este, no sé, ¿tú qué opinas? I don't know. What do you think? Another Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was to not use subject pronouns. Oftentimes, people who are learning Spanish will say things like yo hablo, tú hablas, él come, ella come, whatever. It is very common that in the Spanish-speaking world, native speakers won't say él or yo or nosotros. They will just say hablo, comes, hablamos. So, don't use the subject pronouns. You can if you're trying to provide extra context, but in reality, most native speakers will just omit these unless we need them for extra context. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was to use the word órale. I love the phrase órale. Órale is used when you are shocked or surprised by something. It can be good or bad depending on the context. So, oh man, my girlfriend just broke up with me. Órale, lo siento amigo, right? Ah man, órale, like, too bad. You know, you're surprised. Órale, like, oh, that's too bad. Lo siento. Or someone could say to you, amigo, ¿qué crees? Acabo de ganar la lotería. Órale, qué bueno. Like, no way. Oh, man, that's awesome. Órale is awesome because it can use, like I said, in good context and also bad context. The next Spanish hack I learned in Mexico was how to use the word pedo. The word pedo means like 20 million things in Mexico. Pedo originally means fart. So for example, oye, ¿echaste un pedo? Hey, did you fart? ¿Echaste un pedo? Pedo can also mean a problem. Like, oh, esto es un pedo. Oh man, this is a problem. You can also use it to say what's up to someone in an informal context, but depending on your tone, this can be good or bad. So I could say to my friend, ¿Qué pedo, güey? ¿Cómo estás? What's up, bro? How are you? But if I'm mad at someone, I could say, oye, ¿qué pedo, güey? Like, what's up, man? So the context completely changes it. Pedo can also be used if you're drunk. Ay, güey, estoy pedo. I'm drunk. Pedo. There's many different uses of pedo, but that is really important to know here in Mexico because it can mean a bunch of different things depending on the context of the sentence. And finally, the last Spanish hack I learned here in Mexico was how to use the word ya. So ya can mean already, but it can also mean now, enough. It can also mean yes. So if someone asks you, oye, ¿ya comiste? Ya. Basically meaning, yeah, I already ate. Or if someone is annoying you, you can say, ya, por favor, ya. Like, that's enough. Knock it off. Okay? Ya. Or, tenemos que irnos ya. We need to leave right now. Tenemos que irnos ya. Okay? Not ahorita. Bueno, muchas gracias por ver este video. I hope you learned something new. Click the link in the video description if you want to join my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy and have a 10-minute conversation in Spanish in 90 days without feeling nervous. Gracias. Hasta luego.